Okay, hello everybody! Today we are going to do some Halloween stuff. I don't know if you guys remember when I talked about going to the Vancouver Retro Gaming Expo. I mentioned that I picked up a whole bunch of Disney Adventure magazines. Some of them I had before and some of them I have not. And I just wanted to kind of go over one of these because it is October. And this is the October issue of Disney Adventures. I think it's the first Halloween special that they ever had, because I think the first issue was November the year before. I was trying to do these things kind of in chronological order, but then since I got a bunch of new ones, I'm just going to kind of scrap that and I'll still try and keep it in somewhat of an order, but we're going to go way back. This is the October 1991 issue of Disney Adventure magazine. So we're going to have a look through it. So the person on the front is a fresh-faced, just a widow baby Neil Patrick Harris. So that's kind of fun. You know, who would have thought that he would still be making stuff today? But, you know, we'll talk a little bit about the legacy of NPH as we get deeper into this. A lot of the stuff I really loved about Disney Adventures magazines is on this front cover. You got your celebrity, you got something that's very thematic as far as like what this is about. This is a monster issue. And we have some Disney characters in there. In this case, Huey, Dewey, and Louie being scared of monsters and stuff like that. So let us open up and have a look. So first we have a Three Musketeers adventure. So one thing that's been in not just magazines, but also comics, is comics that are actually advertisements. I remember looking through some old comics that my stepdad had given me from his youth, and they're just full of like a side comic of superheroes solving crimes with Twinkies and stuff like that. You know, just a one-page kind of like, here's a comic, and they're always underwhelming. And that's sort of the case here. I mean, just because, like, you know, you don't have any time to set up anything. There's these three teenagers. I think one of them has a mullet, which is, you know, a travesty in and of itself, but normal at the time. Advertising the Three Musketeers. Three Musketeers bars are amazing. I love them. And so you don't need to make this comic sell them to me. Just tell me to eat one, I'll eat one. Paula Abdul presents Mick Scat and the Stray Mob Cat. I don't know what this is. Cool. I do want to definitely highlight this Lego Blacktron set. Or rather, it's an advertisement for you to buy 3 Lego Blacktron sets. And then you can get instructions to build this other Lego Blacktron set out of the pieces from those ones. Which, you know, if you looked at the back of the boxes of Lego sets at the time, I don't know if this is still what they do, but they showed alternate things you could turn your things into, because they want to inspire you to be creative and feel free to do whatever you wanted with the Lego pieces that you had. And so they're like, you could build this, or you could build this, or you could build whatever you want. I really want to show off this because one of the earliest sets that, it wasn't actually mine, it was my older brother's, but he had, it's called the Suborbital Guardian. Way back in the day we had that one. It was, of course, definitely a welcome part of our Lego collection. Yeah, just looking at it, I get very nostalgic. And we only had the one Blacktron set as far as I know. We didn't start getting a lot more Lego until we were a little bit older than that. So actually, they don't bury the lead. Not very far into this, we get the Neil Patrick Harris interview. And, you know, there's not too much to say about this because he's still a pretty young guy at this point in time. He's still making Doogie Howser, MD. For those of you who don't know what Doogie Howser, MD, that was how he got his start, as far as I know. That was definitely how he became more of a household name, was that show. He was the lead character, and it was all about a genius kid who had made his way through medical school. I think he finished med school by the time he was 16 or something like that. I didn't watch the show that much, but I watched it enough. I kind of resented it in a way because my name is Doug, and so a lot of people would call me Doogie Howser when I was younger, and it really bugged me just because those kind of things really bug you when you're a kid. Was it Doogie Howser MD a good show? I don't know. I could not tell you. I've not seen it recently enough at all. But it was popular. After Doogie Howser, Neil Patrick Harris did kind of disappear for a little while. I think he was in a few things here and there, like enough that, you know, no one really forgot who he was. Like the one that sticks out in my mind when, you know, he didn't really have his comeback yet was his part in Starship Troopers. It just seems so weird to see Doogie Howser, who at that time was like a very family-friendly star, in such an adult movie. That was very strange. Between the Harold and Kumar movies and then How I Met Your Mother, then boom, he was back, and he hasn't really been gone since. So, but if there was a while where we were kind of without Neil Patrick Harris, but this was before that time. This is prime young Neil Patrick Harris. So this is him just kind of talking about his favorite monsters and stuff, because they're really sticking to the theme. And some scary things that happened to him when he was a younger kid, like him just kind of being trolled by a friend's dad or something like that, like who pretended to be a serial killer. Actually, it sounds rather traumatizing, but, he seems to have a good sense of humor about it all. The thing that I liked the most, actually, when I was really little, was just the artwork. These monsters that they drew behind him and with him and stuff like that. Like this, just really creative, really fun looking. I was such an age, like 91, I was like 5 years old. I was just in it for the art mostly. I know this is a kid's magazine, but reading through this, it was very challenging. Like, I could read, but not super well. Just mostly, I just like coming in and looking at the pictures. So seeing Neil Patrick Harris hanging out with a few goopy green monsters was just what I wanted, apparently. We actually discussed this, curiously enough, there's a few coincidences here. Talked about White Fang in the last episode of this show, just because I think it was a movie called like Alaska or something like that reminded me of it. So this came out right around the time that White Fang was in theaters, or maybe just on video. I want to say in theaters though. And so this talking about a lot of like animals that were in movies. Nowadays, you see a lot of animals being replaced with CG animals, and I think that's probably for cost purposes, because you have to bring in the animal wrangler, and that stuff isn't cheap. And also for safety reasons, because even though these are well-trained animals, there is always a possibility that something could go wrong. And so that's not going to happen with an animal put into post-production. The downside is that even still, CG animals just don't look like the real thing. They look very good, but they just don't look real. And real animals look real. It's a trade, Like, I totally get why some people may not want an actual bear ripping apart Leonardo DiCaprio in The Revenant. It's a safety concern, and it's especially with scenes like that where it's very violent. Anyways, let's talk about some ways that you can train animals to do things in movies. Apparently, tarantula, you just blow on their legs with a straw, and that makes them move because you're bugging them. I was thinking there was a show called Doghouse where there was an uncle in the body of the family dog or something like that, and he would always talk.
I don't believe it.
Believe it.
And he's like, and it's just because you put peanut butter at the top of his mouth, and that's how you get dogs to kind of like talk, like move their mouth, and then you just. This also references another movie that I was thinking about a little while ago called, I think it was just called Bear or The Bear. I never watched it because it came out when I was just a little too young. According to this, it came out in the. I think it came out in the very late 80s, maybe even 1990. I never saw it. I always wanted to. But it's not really talked about much these days. So let me know if you remember Bear and if it's any good. Let me know in the comments down below. Yeah, here we go. Let's talk about the TV slate. What's debuting? This is actually kind of cool because I know actually a lot of these shows. Not everything. I don't know what Teach is. Some teacher who inspires kids, probably, all these teenagers in their mid-20s. But it references the new show Step by Step. I remember Step by Step. And they mention it being kind of a similar concept to the Brady Bunch, which never clicked with me before. That, yeah, it's basically these two families, blondes and brunettes. The mom and the dad marry, and they each have kids of their own, and hijinks ensue. And that was basically the premise of the Brady Bunch, except the Brady Bunch was a gender split of all girls, all boys. The man had the boys, the woman had the girls, and in this case, it was a little more mixed as far as gender goes. But I liked Step by Step. I watched it for years. Yeah, I was a TGIF. There was a block of television, TGIF, which I think I also mentioned in another episode, probably, because it was very popular. Yeah, it's weird kind of seeing it here as the new show, Step by Step. That's crazy. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures. It doesn't say if it's the cartoon. I remember there was a cartoon. But was there also a show, like a live-action show that... clearly the cartoon, I think, is fairly well remembered, but if there was a live-action show, it clearly didn't last long. It also mentions Erie, Indiana, which last Halloween, Allie and I watched for Allie Hasn't. It's so interesting because I remember it did originally debut in 1991. But I didn't watch it until reruns years later, and that's apparently when most people watched it. But the downside is that once it caught on, the kids, because they're kid actors, they got a sliver of years that they can kind of capitalize on their age. They all aged out of their roles, so they couldn't make a sequel. They just kind of had I think it was just one season, and then that was it. The Torkelsons. Comedy about a 14-year-old girl who hopes that she switched at birth because her family is so weird. Don't know it. Cast of dinosaurs will be getting bigger. So I remember dinosaurs. We'll talk more in depth about that one because there is a very specific magazine on dinosaurs. So I won't get too much into that. But I did like that show a lot, if for no other reason than just the visual style. This mentions Muppets Take Manhattan, which I only saw very recently, and it was okay. Not the best Muppet movie, but it was alright. And oh no, so yeah, we're talking about what's on video. So yeah, there's Muppets Take Manhattan. Man from Snowy River, don't know that one. The Adventures of Milo and Otis. Okay, so that's when it came out. Don't watch The Adventures of Milo and Otis. It is a film that was made unethically. Although technically they just took footage from a Japanese film that was made years earlier. It was still made from footage. Okay, I don't know how else to put this, but let's just say that they went through a lot of kittens. That's all I have to say. They went through a lot of kittens. Boils my blood. Don't want to think about it too much. Do not watch Milo and Otis. Do not give that film any legacy. It just deserves to be buried in time. So my apologies to people who grew up with the film. I know that it means a lot to some people, but the harsh truth is that it was a film made with blood. So don't watch it. Music. They're talking about bands that I don't know who they are. Pretty in Pink. Just look at some very, very young girl band, but Tommy Page. I looked up Tommy Page, so he did have some hits. He was actually a pretty big deal. He's got I was expecting to look up his Wikipedia article and not find much, but it actually was pretty extensive. He did release music, new music through 2000, had a best of in 2014, and then I found out he died in like 2016. I think it was 2016. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong right here. It's weird looking at this moment in history when he's like this blossoming star. Then you're like, wow, whatever happened to this guy? And then you look it up and like, oh, he's dead. Oh, 25 years later. I mean, I know 25 years is a long time, but he's young here. And so he died before he was 50. Sorry if this is a downer, but just some stories don't have the ending that you kind of hope for. Again, because this is a Halloween special, we got a little bit of information about candy, because candy is a big part of Halloween. Apparently, about a third of all American candies were made in Chicago. One of the things it says is if you work for the Hershey Company, you eat all the chocolate you want on the job. And this is not an uncommon practice for a lot of chocolate places or candy places and stuff like that, is you are welcome to just pack it back. What happens is that you get your employees basically eating to their heart's content and soon discovering that they don't want to eat chocolate so much anymore. They basically max out. And it's pretty smart, actually. Pretty smart strategy to just kind of get people very desensitized to the stuff that they're working with. They go, like, good, you had your fill? All right, awesome, now let's get to work. It's pretty smart. I know that my mom, way back in the day, used to work for House of Brussels. It was a, I don't think they're still around, but very similar to Purdy's. They're just a chocolate place. And yeah, she could eat all the chocolate you want on the job. And very quickly, you get very sick of chocolate. Yeah. And here we got some Game Boy games. Let's have a look. Mickey's Dangerous Chase and Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Yeah, so at this point, we still had Roger Rabbit buzzing around. Yeah, I haven't really heard much about these particular Game Boy games. And I never had a Game Boy, so I have some Game Boy games now. And I do have a Game Boy, but I rarely play it. I usually actually just play my Game Boy games on my Super Game Boy. Connected with my Super Nintendo to play them on the screen. I don't have to worry about the small gray screens and not being able to see anything. So, one thing that's very different about Disney Adventures in the very, very early days is that they spread the comics all throughout. Like later on, they just have the comic section, and I might like that format better just because everything's a little more organized. But I also do see the appeal of this is that, you're reading through stuff and then boom, you get a comic. Then you're reading through stuff and boom, you get a comic. If you have the patience to kind of actually read things from start to finish. If you were just interested in the comics, I can totally see the benefit of having the comics section. Tailspin is the first comic, The Rise of the Pillager Queen. It was very strange going through this because I haven't seen Tailspin since I was so little. I remember Don Carnage, one of the main villains, and also there was Shere Khan. I think he was still called Shere Khan because they were all Jungle Book characters kind of put into a more modern or a World War I or II kind of setting, like that era. There's some characters I didn't remember. For example, this guy here, Colonel Spigot. I just had no memory of him, and I saw it, and it was also like a flood of memories. Like, whoa, I remember this guy, short warthog dude. Yeah, so that was surreal. For the comic itself, I don't need to dive too deep in the comics and tell you what they're about. You know, they're fine. They're good. They're fun. Moving right along, little advertisement for some trading cards. Trading cards were so cool back in the day. I'd say they're not really so much a thing, but I guess they are, aren't they? Only though most trading cards double as like games these days, where there was an era where they were just cards. They, you know, you just looked at them, they were just cards. Because nowadays it's like, I think everything is like a Pokemon or Magic the Gathering, kind of like games along those lines. I kind of understand the appeal of that because, you know, it's not just something you look at, it's something you play with. And you can also look at it. Tons of candy advertisements. Jeez. I wanted to talk a little bit about this. I usually try to keep to some of the pop culture-y stuff, but this is kind of fun. Talking about where certain things came from, particularly animals and stuff like that. Animals and plants. It's essentially just talking about invasive species and how they don't belong here. The horses aren't doing so much damage, although rats apparently aren't supposed to be over here in North America, but they definitely are now. Tumbleweeds. Tumbleweeds came from Russia. Man, I don't know if you know much about tumbleweeds, but they are an infestation. I know there's sort of like, there's the vision of them rolling by and scenes from old Western movies, but they are in reality just a bloody menace because they are prickly, they just fly around and break apart, and they multiply like crazy. They've been trying to destroy the tumbleweed for years and years and years. It's unstoppable. Tumbleweeds are a menace, and they really do a lot of damage to local agriculture. I think we're just gonna have to get to a point in science where we can somehow just like genetically augment them so that they can't reproduce or something like that. I learned this all from CGP Gray's video on it, so I'll put a link to that maybe up there down below. Definitely check it out if you just want to like put your heads in your hands and just cry about invasive species. Bat Boy. So this kid, it says he's 16. He does not look 16 to me. He looks about 12, but you know, we all grow at our own pace. So this is not the Bat Boy from the National Enquirer. This is a 16-year-old bat enthusiast who has bats of his own. It does say that bats are very difficult to keep, and he was only allowed to do so because he needed to be basically certified to keep bats by showing the degree of expertise he had. I learned from this some of the myths about vampire bats and how they mostly actually just feed on livestock. They do not attack people. Alright, got a few more comics. This one's just sort of about the Beagle Boys from DuckTales. Moving right along to some Disney Channel stuff. I do not know what any of this stuff is. So this is kind of the big feature of this. So I am looking forward to talking about some of this stuff. The monsters. So I learned a lot about monsters and stuff from this back in the day. Medusa, the Huawei, Nizagami. I just love the artwork of this stuff. I don't know about you guys, but I love the fact that it does kind of look like, maybe not these ones so much, but it looks like some of them could have been drawn by kids. It talks deep about Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster, and Bigfoot. I love that there's still a thriving community of Bigfoot enthusiasts. I mean, I don't believe in any of that, but the fact that just like there's so many people still so devoted to finding Bigfoot just amuses me endlessly. Here's the ones that actually look like they're drawn by kids. Hello. Yeah, hello. Mothman. Essentially, this guy's going around terrorizing Richard Gere. Bigfoot again. Skunk Ape is a more stinky version of Bigfoot, essentially. One thing I wish they mentioned was the Chupacabra. What even are we doing if we're not talking about the Chupacabra? So speaking of trading cards, they got some cards right here that are thankfully still in here. I am glad to see it. I think my brother and I may have pulled ours out and then promptly lost them because I don't feel as familiar with this artwork as I do like the rest of this thing. Yeah, I learned a lot about different monsters through this. Godzilla, Phantom of the Opera. I didn't know who Joe Dante was at the time, although I was aware of Gremlins. But apparently he was afraid of the giant ants from the movie Them. I like Them, actually. It's a really fun little classic movie. It says Frankenstein. It's Frankenstein's monster, but, you know, this is a conversation we don't need to have. Steven Spielberg. My biggest fear was the tree outside the bedroom window. I love how this mentions some monster movies, and it mentions Harry and the Hendersons, and I'm like, I never would have thought of Harry and the Hendersons as a monster movie. It's just like a Bigfoot comedy. I don't know. But sure, why not? And it mentions the Monster Squad. There you go. There's another little connection to something we're going to be doing for Allie Hasn't very soon. Christina Ricci, 11, who plays Wednesday in the up-and-coming Addams Family movie. I was afraid of sharks in the bathtub. I never liked having the bottom of the bathtub covered. I was also scared of monsters in the dark. There you go. Christina Ricci. Still probably the most iconic Wednesday Addams, although I guess we'll have to see how the new one does. This was also the first time I saw Calvin and Hobbes, was just this little comic strip right here. Now, I would go on to be a huge Calvin and Hobbes fan. Before I was even done elementary school, I had bought most of the comic collection through the Scholastic program. Yeah, I don't know what it was. No, I know what it was. I really connected with Calvin. Then I was just a weird kid with a lot of imagination, and I even had an imaginary friend who was a tiger. So I had physical tiger stuffies, but they were separate from the tiger imaginary friend that I used to have. Really, me and Calvin were peas in a pod, except he was an only child, and I was not an only child. So I didn't have to resort to playing with my imaginary friend all the time like he did. I had brothers. Yes? Oh, we got more DuckTales comics. Oh, actually, but I want to talk about these Disney cards, actually, because I'm pretty sure that my mom had collected these. I would love to have a look at those if she still has them. She might have gotten rid of them, or they might be somewhere in storage or just in a closet or something. These Disney cards were pretty cool. More collector's cards. Collector cards were a really cool thing back in the day. I even got... Come on, Reza. Show a little respect. I even have a whole bunch of collector's cards that I still have sitting in a storage container, I think, in my room right now. So maybe we should go through that one of these days, talk about them. But I did not have these Disney cards. So we'll just skip the comics because, we've seen, I'm not going to just read the comics. A little article about Mr. Wizard. Does anyone else remember Mr. Wizard? I definitely think that no kids these days would remember him. I feel, if anything, I'm like the youngest who would remember Mr. Wizard, because I barely remember him and his show. So anyone younger than me, I don't imagine would. What if that guy's still kicking? So the video game section isn't as big right now. So what we have two games here that they want to talk about. I've never played either one of them, but I know a little bit about them because I'm always watching, video game videos on the internet. First one is for Game Boy. It's called Faceball 2000. They score pretty well. Graphics 5 out of 5. Sound 4, Control 5, Challenge 5. So they give 4.75 overall, which is really good. But I think history, because, we have the benefit of 30 years hindsight. My understanding this game is not actually that great, but it was pretty revolutionary for the time. Not just because you could hook up several Game Boys together and play with your friends. I think it says 4 players, up to 4 players, which is in and of itself pretty impressive. But also just graphically, the fact that they managed to do these sort of 3D landscapes on the Game Boy. For some programmers were really pushing the Game Boy to do things that everyone just thought were impossible. A lot of developers dismissed it as being a place where they can kind of just shovel on a bunch of little puzzle games. Not that some of those puzzle games are great, some of them are not so great, but it was apparently capable of doing much more. And the other game is Toe Jam and Earl, a classic Sega Genesis game. Now, I have not played it, although I can because it's on my Sega Genesis Classic. I just kind of remember it kind of embodying the attitude of Sega versus Nintendo, where these two alien guys were just so cool. The game itself was actually very... it had attitude, but not edge. You could easily play it around your parents and not worry about them going oh my god, we should have got them a Nintendo. It was just kind of goofy. You just explored and found your spaceship parts and fixed your ship. And the appeal of it was that it was always random. The landscapes were created randomly. So every time you played it, it was a little different. So that's one thing I like about Toe Jam and Earl, and I do intend to play it. I am playing games. I just I can only get through so many at a time. This one they really committed to a whole bunch of panels. This isn't one of the official comics of the thing. This is a big long advertisement just for M&M's and the Mars Corporation treats. But the art style definitely got kids reading. So I love some of these candies so much. I got a sweet tooth. I love chocolate. I'm not going to deny it. I'm reading this and I feel myself being influenced by the advertisements of these ridiculous aliens, Bounties, and Three Musketeers, and Twix. Twix is okay, but Bounties I love. Mars bars I love. But the Mars Corporation is also horrible. It doesn't stop me from buying some of their stuff from time to time, but don't go thinking just because they make chocolate that they're a nice corporation. They don't have your best interests in mind. So we're going to skip past a few other things. This is a whole thing about baseball card collecting, and we've talked about cards enough, and baseball cards I know very little about. And NASCAR. Is it NASCAR? I don't think it says NASCAR anywhere on here. I don't think it's officially NASCAR, but it's just racing cars, and honestly, I do not care anything about cars racing. Bunch of people just making sport of spewing toxins into the atmosphere. Oh, and a Roger Rabbit comic. You know, it's interesting because Roger Rabbit was a flame that burned very bright, you know. Obviously there's the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was a masterpiece, in my opinion. A lot of people often forget there were other Roger Rabbit things, like in this case, comics. And there were some short films as well that played before some movies, both in theaters and on video. I remember specifically because I had Honey, I Shrunk the Kids on VHS, and beforehand there was Tummy Trouble, the short Baby Herman swallows his rattle and Roger Rabbit freaks out. And it's so much fun. It's so much fun. I could wish Roger Rabbit stuck around. He had a few years of a good run, and that was it. This one's called Too Many Tunes, and there's part 1 and part 2. I don't know why they bothered to separate them. Like, why have a part 1 and a part 2? It's just they run right after the other. Why not just have a bigger, longer comic? And then there's a ghost story selected by Stephen King himself. I wonder how they got him in on this. I don't know. You know, I don't want to read you the whole thing just because we don't have any time for that. But, check it out. This freaked me out as a kid, this little display here of this kid with varying degrees of scars and monster makeup. So just sort of telling you some very low-budget ways to make some makeup. Yeah, so that's kind of fun. Now we've got the puzzles and games section. It's kind of weird looking at that because my brother and I, we always did the puzzles. So seeing them not done is like, oh, okay, weird. And similarly with this Captain Crunch advertisement right here, we would always fold them up to create a picture and then in this case help solve a maze. And now here it is unfolded. And it's like, oh yeah. It just looks so fresh and so clean. There's final couple advertisements. The Little Mermaid game on Capcom, which I have not played. Although I hear it's actually pretty good, but very easy because it's more geared toward younger children. I played some of the Nintendo Capcom games, DuckTales, Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers, which skewed younger, but you could still play them as an adult and potentially lose. I also played Darkwing Duck in my adult years, which is actually, I feel, much harder than those other two games. But The Little Mermaid I have not played, but my understanding is that it skews younger. And boom, Jet Set. I would see these advertisements all the time. I'm still not sure. Is it advertising clothes or balloons? I don't know. I tried to hurry through this one because although it's a bit of a thicker issue, because the older ones were a little fatter than the newer ones, you can even see that when you put them next to each other. I hope there's enough interesting little pop culture nuggets from October 1991 that you had a good time reliving this through with me. That's all. Thank you so much for watching. And have a great October. Enjoy some pumpkin pie. And don't forget to watch Starship Troopers.